Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. The Starlight Kettle breathed quietude in the deep hours, a haven usually populated by the ghosts of long-haul truckers or solitary souls nursing lukewarm coffee against the encroaching dawn. But that night, the stillness fractured. 5 figures breached the doorway, and the air thickened, charged like the moments before lightning splits the sky. I felt trapped, a solitary tree on an open plain awaiting the inevitable storm. 6 months I'd spent navigating the constellation of coffee stains and grease spots at the kettle, ever since my university aspirations dissolved into the mundane need for rent money. It wasn't a path paved with promise, yet the nocturnal solitude held its own strange comfort, a rhythm found in the hiss of the espresso machine, the sizzle of patties on the griddle. Most nights, the quiet was a companion. This particular night began under that familiar, somnolent spell. Around 2, the witching hour bleeding into the bleary morning, I traced familiar patterns with a damp cloth across the laminate counter. From the corner, a jukebox wept a bluesy lament, its melancholy notes barely registering. The sole occupants besides myself were the Harpers, a couple settled into a booth by the window, sharing the last rites of an apple pie with quiet reverence. Then, the chime above the door, a tinny, incongruous sound. My gaze lifted. 5 men spilled inside, their laughter too loud, their clothes too sharp for this humble roadside sanctuary. A volatile energy emanated from them, a restlessness that coiled in the air. Something flickered in their collective gaze, a current in their movements that snagged on my nerves, pulling them taut. "Evening," I offered, stretching my lips into the practiced curve of a service smile. "Find you gentlemen something?" One detached himself as the clear focal point, tall, his hair a distinguished map of silver and black. He smiled, but it didn't touch the flint chips of his eyes. It was the baring of teeth. "Coffee," he commanded, the word clipped. "An ocean of it, and keep the tide coming, sweetheart." The diminutive stung, but I smoothed my expression, burying the irritation. No sense kicking a hornet's nest, especially one buzzing with this kind of energy. I poured 5 mugs, the dark liquid swirling, and retreated to my station behind the counter, a self-imposed boundary. From there, I watched. They commandeered the largest booth, their conversation a low, rumbling thunder I couldn't decipher, punctuated by bursts of sharp laughter. Periodically, eyes would dart around the kettle, assessing, marking territory. The Harpers finished, signaled for their bill. As Mrs. Harper gathered her coat, a low whistle cut through the diner's hum. "Hey now, Mama," one of the 5 called out, leering. "Leave Grandpa behind. Come warm yourself with us. We know how to treat a lady." Mr. Harper stiffened, his face flushing a dangerous crimson. "Listen here, you." But the silver-haired leader, Silas, sliced through his protest with a dismissive wave. "Simmer down, Pops. Just admiring the view." I saw the spark, felt the potential for ignition. "Folks," I intervened, my voice louder than intended, "your check's ready whenever you are. Safe travels." The Harpers didn't need telling twice. They paid in a flurry of fumbled bills and hurried out, the bell marking their escape. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. It was just me and the 5 of them now. The Starlight Kettle suddenly felt claustrophobically small. For a time, they seemed absorbed in their coffee and conversation, though the undercurrent of menace never truly subsided. As the minutes bled towards 3, however, their volume swelled, their posture grew bolder, edges sharpening into outright aggression. Crude remarks began to fly, some glancing off the walls, others aimed directly like poisoned darts at me. I focused on the rhythmic wipe of the counter, the refill cycle of their mugs, pretending deafness, though my hands trembled betrayingly. Around 3:30, the bell chimed again, startlingly loud. A young woman entered, weariness etched onto her face, likely adrift after a late shift elsewhere. 5 heads swiveled in unison, a predatory pack catching a scent on the wind. "Well, look what the night dragged in," Silas announced, his voice resonant enough to fill the small space. "Maybe this evening has some life in it, after all." The newcomer, Lena, shot a nervous glance towards the booth, then met my eyes across the counter. I tried to telegraph a warning, a silent plea for caution, but she merely slid onto a stool, requesting a menu with a tired sigh. Before I could fetch it, one of the men, broad-shouldered, his arms canvases of swirling ink, detached himself from the group and ambled over to her. "Brute," I mentally tagged him. "Evening sunshine," Brute purred, leaning against the counter beside her. "Lonely stool, why not join the party over here? Our treat." Lena shook her head, a barely perceptible movement. "I'm fine right here, thank you." Rejection wasn't in Brute's vocabulary. His hand landed on her shoulder, heavy, possessive. "Don't be like that. We're friendly fellas." I saw the flicker of fear ignite in Lena's eyes, the way her body went rigid beneath his touch. Impulse overrode caution. "Sir," my voice cut through the charged air, surprisingly steady. "She said she's fine. Please leave her be." The Starlight Kettle fell utterly silent. 10 eyes pivoted towards me. My stomach plummeted. What had I done? Brute slowly retracted his hand and returned to the booth, but Silas rose. He approached the counter with a deliberate, unhurried gait, the predatory grace of a big cat closing in. "What was that you said?" My throat constricted. I forced a swallow. "I said, leave her alone. She doesn't want company." He leaned in, invading my space, the stale scent of coffee sharp on his breath. "And who plans on making us? Little thing like you." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I was sure he could hear. Yet I held his gaze. There are cameras, I bluffed, nodding towards the empty ceiling corners. And the sheriff's department has already been alerted to potential disturbances tonight. He stared, unblinking, for a long, suspended moment. I braced myself, expecting a hand to lash out. Instead, he laughed, a dry, brittle sound devoid of warmth. Got nerve, kid. Gotta give you that. He turned back to his companions. All right, boys. Atmosphere's gone sour here. They rose, scraping chairs, gathering themselves. Filing out, Silas paused at the door, turning back one last time. We'll be seeing you, sweetheart. The bell jingled their departure into the night. Air rushed back into my lungs in a ragged gasp I hadn't realized I was holding. My legs threatened to buckle. I gripped the counter edge for support. Lena looked at me, her eyes wide pools of reflected fluorescent light. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what might have. I could only nod, the adrenaline still singing through my veins, rendering speech impossible. She finished her coffee quickly and left, leaving me truly alone in the echoing silence. Every creak of the old building, every passing headlight, sent jolts of fear through me for the remainder of my shift. When my relief ambled in at 6, the sight of another human face nearly brought tears to my eyes. I convinced myself it was over, a harrowing anecdote for down the line. But a week later, walking towards my car in the pre-dawn gloom of the employee lot, a familiar silhouette detached itself from the side of my vehicle. Silas. His predatory smile gleamed under the weak security light. Told you we'd be seeing you around, sweetheart, he murmured. I froze, keys digging into my palm, suddenly feeling less like metal and more like a flimsy defense. What do you want? He pushed away from the car, closing the distance between us. Just picking up our conversation. See, my associates and I, we take issue with being told what to do, especially by little girls playing waitress. My head snapped left, then right. Empty asphalt stretched into shadow. The kettle behind me was dark, silent, utterly alone. Look, I stammered, fighting to keep the tremor from my voice. No trouble, I was just working. His laugh scraped against the night air, raising goose flesh on my arms. Trouble? Oh, sweetheart, trouble hasn't even begun. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision. Horror bloomed cold in my chest as the other 4 emerged from the surrounding darkness, forming a loose, menacing circle. In that instant, the choice became starkly clear. Crumple, plead, hope for a mercy they clearly didn't possess, or fight. I chose fight. With a surge of desperate strength, I swung my heavy shoulder bag in a wide arc, connecting solidly with the side of Silas's head. A satisfying thud, a grunt of pained surprise. He staggered. Seizing the fleeting moment of disarray, I bolted. Raw terror fueled my legs, propelling me faster than I knew I could move. Shouts erupted behind me, the heavy thud of pursuing footsteps pounding the pavement, but adrenaline was a potent shield. Out of the lot, down the dark street, lungs burning, heart threatening to explode. I didn't dare stop until the garish fluorescent lights of a 24-hour convenience store offered sanctuary. I burst through the automatic doors, gulping air, shouting for the startled clerk to call the police. The following hours dissolved into a haze of flashing lights, official forms, and repetitive questions. My car sat violated in the lot, tires slashed, but the men had vanished like smoke. The next day, I walked away from the Starlight Kettle for good. The paycheck wasn't worth the chilling fear. Weeks bled into months. Every shadow held a potential threat. Every unexpected noise made me jump. I bought pepper spray, installed extra locks. Gradually, the suffocating blanket of fear began to lift, though its imprint remained. Life cautiously resumed its rhythm, but the memory of that night stayed sharp, a lesson etched deep. It revealed a resilience I hadn't known resided within me, the capacity to push back when cornered. A brutal education, nearly paid for at immense cost, but it unearthed a vein of courage I never suspected I possessed. Years have passed. Sometimes the faces of those men surface in my thoughts. I wonder where their particular brand of darkness travels now, whose quiet nights they disrupt. But I also think of Lena at the counter and the small defiant act that might have shielded her from a far uglier encounter. I no longer serve coffee through the lonely hours, but I carry the kettle's lesson. It reminds me that even when enveloped by the deepest night, choice remains. Succumb to the shadows or ignite your own small light. It's rarely simple, almost never safe, but ultimately that choice sculpts who we become. And I choose to be the one who stands, however fiercely the darkness presses in. Peace shattered like dropped glass, the instant silhouettes detached themselves from the deeper ink of the tree line, gliding towards the cabin. My borrowed sanctuary warped, twisting into a crucible where survival, not study, became the only syllabus. What began as a favor, a simple week minding Dr. Eris Thorne's secluded haven while she lectured overseas, devolved into a night etched in fear, a haunting that clings still. Call me Elara. I chase footnotes and dwindling grant money through the labyrinth of academia. The offer, a hushed retreat, cradled by wilderness, perfect for wrestling my thesis into submission, had felt like sanctuary found. For 3 sun-drenched days, 3 star-stitched nights, bliss reigned. The cabin, a timbered embrace with a porch that surveyed a kingdom of whispering pines, breathed tranquility. Days dissolved into reading, the rhythmic clack of my keyboard, and long, meandering explorations of moss-carpeted trails. Evenings found me nestled by the hearth's glow, the wind's sigh through the branches, and the distant call of an owl my only companions. The 4th night brought the rupture. Dinner simmered, a melody hummed loose on the radio, and then abruptly, the world snuffed out. The cabin plunged into an absolute dark, save for the fading pulse of embers in the fireplace. Initially, annoyance flickered, not alarm. Such remote locales often flirted with power failures. Locating the emergency torch Dr. Thorne had pointed out, I moved towards the circuit breaker. A flicker, peripheral, snagged my attention as I passed the main room's wide window. I froze, breath caught, eyes straining against the oppressive blackness. There, poised at the edge of the manicured clearing, three distinct shapes moved with unnerving deliberation towards the house. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Visitors were anomalies this deep in the woods, and their gait, low, hugging the shadows, screamed wrongness. My thumb found the torch switch, extinguishing the beam. I sank below the window line, a sudden, desperate hope flaring. Perhaps unseen, I'd be ignored, the cabin dismissed as empty. But crouched there, air held tight in my chest. A sound sliced through the strained silence, chilling me to the marrow, the metallic click-snip of wire cutters. The phone line severed. Panic, a wild bird, beat against my ribs, alone, miles separating me from the nearest hint of civilization. My mobile, a useless brick in this signal dead zone. Options scattered like frightened mice. Flee? Into the lightless maw of the forest, terrain they likely knew intimately. Concealment seemed the only viable path. But where? The groan of timber underfoot on the porch galvanized me. Decision made. My backpack became a frantic repository for a water bottle, a handful of energy bars. Then, recalling Dr. Thorne's storm contingency, I slid towards the root cellar door, pulling the heavy, cool wood shut behind me, just as the brittle shattering of glass echoed from the main room. They were inside. Damp earth and the faint, sweet scent of decay clung to the cellar air. Shelves lined the walls, burdened with preserved harvests and forgotten gardening tools. I folded myself into the farthest corner, behind crates breathing dust and the ghost of potatoes, shrinking, willing my lungs to stillness. Above, the cabin groaned under their intrusion, the violent slam of drawers, the clatter and crash of overturned belongings. What obsession drove them? Everywhere, commanded a voice like grinding gravel. Boss wants it, said it's gotta be here. And the girl? Another voice, thinner, sharper. My pulse stuttered. They knew. Find her, the first voice snarled. Maybe she saw where the old woman stashed it. Stashed what? What secret could my unassuming professor possess that warranted this violation? The cellar door hinges wind open. I clamped my eyes shut, breath trapped. Cones of torchlight scythed through the darkness, sweeping inches from my refuge once, then again. Discovery felt inevitable, a hand poised to fall. But the light retracted, the door thumped closed, and footsteps receded, unseen, for now. Time elongated in that subterranean darkness. Each second stretched taut. Every muscle screamed with tension as I strained, listening to the muffled chaos above. Hours might have passed, or mere minutes. Then, gradually, the sounds diminished, fading into an unnerving quiet. Had they departed? I counted heartbeats, counted breaths, counted to 1,000 before daring to uncoil my cramped limbs. Pins and needles erupted in my feet as I slowly rose. Creeping to the door, I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence held sway. A deep, trembling breath. I eased the door open a fraction, peering into the ravaged main room. Furniture lay brutalized, drawers disgorged their contents across the floorboards, but the space appeared deserted. I slipped out, a wraith in the wreckage, eyes scanning every shadow. Gone? Had they truly gone? Just as a fragile tendril of relief began to uncurl within me, the low growl of an engine vibrated through the floorboards. Headlight beams slashed across the windows as the vehicle braked outside. Instinct slammed me down behind the overturned sofa, heart hammering against my ribs. A car door slammed shut. Heavy boots crunched on the gravel path, approaching. Anything? A new voice called, crisp with authority. Place is clean, came the gruff reply from near the porch. No sign of the document or the girl. Document. The word hung in the air. What document? Keep searching, the authoritative voice commanded. Take it apart if you have to, and find that girl. She can't have gone far. Staying was impossible. Discovery was merely delayed. Escape, raw, desperate escape, was the only answer. The back door beckoned, a dark rectangle only yards away. If I could reach it, melt into the woods. Taking another steadying breath, I began to crawl, keeping low, a frantic prayer on my lips. My hand stretched for the handle, and a floorboard shrieked betrayal beneath my weight. The cabin fell, utterly silent. Then, quickening footsteps converging on my position. Thought abandoned me. I wrenched the door open and bolted. Shouts erupted behind me, the unmistakable sounds of pursuit giving chase. I plunged headlong into the swallowing blackness of the forest, unseen branches lashing my face as I stumbled blindly over roots and through grasping undergrowth. Direction dissolved, only the imperative to create distance mattered. I ran until my lungs burned like acid, until my legs turned to water beneath me. Finally, strength utterly spent, I collapsed behind the broad trunk of an ancient oak, gulping air in ragged, painful gasps. As the frantic rhythm of my heart began to subside, I strained my ears, listening past my own ragged breathing. Only the forest's nocturnal symphony answered, the rustle of unseen creatures, the sigh of wind high in the canopy. Had I shaken them, or were they out there still, casting a methodical net through the trees? I couldn't remain here. Help. Authority. But which way? Panic had scoured all sense of direction from my mind. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving the stark reality exposed, lost, hunted, alone in the vast, indifferent woods. No signal, no lifeline, and pursued by men whose motives remained dangerously obscure. A moment of despair washed over me, hot tears tracing cold paths on my cheeks. Then, drawing on some hidden reserve, I forced clarity. Dr. Thorne had mentioned a ranger station, perhaps 5 miles east, a destination, a chance. But east? Where was east? I tilted my head back, searching the fragmented sky visible through the leaves. There, Polaris, anchored in the familiar cradle of the Dipper. I found my bearing. It wasn't much, but it was a vector. It was hope. Summoning the dregs of my endurance, I pushed myself upright and began to move. Stealth became my watchword. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves sent jolts of fear through me. I glanced constantly over my shoulder, expecting shadows to detach and resolve into figures. Hours bled together. Blisters bloomed on my feet. Muscles screamed in protest, but I refused to stop. The image of my pursuers finding me was a relentless spur. Just as exhaustion threatened to pull me under for good, a pale luminescence filtered through the trees ahead. A light. The ranger station. Relief, potent and overwhelming, surged through me, lending wings to my battered feet. I stumbled from the tree line into the graveled parking area as the first blush of dawn painted the eastern sky. The ranger on duty, startled by my disheveled state, filthy, scratched, eyes wide with trauma, listened intently, his initial shock hardening into professional concern as he reached for the phone. The ensuing days blurred into a montage of police interviews, flashing cameras, and stark headlines. Dr. Thorne, it transpired, was entangled in a dangerous whistleblower case, her quiet life a facade for possessing documents capable of toppling powerful figures. Most of the men who'd terrorized the cabin were apprehended, but their leader, the voice of cold authority, vanished. For weeks, every unexpected shadow held his potential presence. Every sudden noise convinced me he'd come to ensure my silence. A year has spun round, yet the forest pursues me in sleep, its phantom branches grasping. I inhabit the city now, seeking solace in its ceaseless hum and artificial light. My thesis gathers dust, the research notes tainted by the memory of that week. But inch by painful inch, I am reclaiming the territory of my life. Survival, I'm learning, isn't merely about outrunning the immediate threat. It's the arduous process of confronting the echoes of fear, of moving forward, one dawn at a time. Certainty of absolute safety remains elusive, perhaps forever lost. But nested within the fear is a newfound knowledge. I possess a resilience I never suspected. If I could endure that night, that flight through the devouring woods, then surely I can navigate whatever else life might cast before me. So should you ever find yourself embraced by the solitude of a remote cabin and a dissonant chord strikes within you, heed that instinct. Sometimes, the most perilous predators aren't the creatures of fang and claw, but those who walk upright, cloaked in secrets they would kill to protect. The skeletal frame of the Blackwood Ironworks clawed at the bruised twilight, a ruin etched against the deepening indigo. Vacant sockets, where windows once sat, surveyed the overgrown grounds, harboring histories I was inexplicably drawn to unravel. As my fingers wrestled with the corroded defiance of the gate lock, the weight of this first night pressed down, a simple security detail morphing, unseen, into a crucible testing nerve against dangers starkly human and perhaps shades less definable. My name is Silas. Necessity, sharp and unforgiving, had driven me here. Our town withered under an economic blight, and with a child soon to enter the world, the luxury of choice had evaporated. The advertisement for a night watchman at the derelict ironworks glittered like fool's gold. Easy hours guarding echoes and dust. A catastrophic misjudgment. With a tortured screech of metal surrendering to rust, the lock yielded. I slipped through the breach, swallowed by the compound's silence. Years had passed since the clang of hammers fell silent. The furnaces cooled, the lifeblood of its workforce drained away. Now it served as a haunt for trespassers and those seeking cheap thrills amongst the decay, or so the hurried briefing had suggested. My torch beam sliced the oppressive dark, guiding me towards a squat security hut huddled near the main edifice. Inside, a space barely generous enough for claustrophobia, a scarred desk, a solitary chair protesting my weight, a bank of antiquated monitors that sputtered into grainy existence at the flip of a switch. Most screens offered only a blizzard of static, dead eyes in the network, but a few persisted, displaying spectral, monochrome visions of deserted corridors and skeletal assembly lines. I sank into the complaining chair, the pervasive scent of mildew and time clinging to the air like a shroud. The initial hours unfolded in a slow, deliberate rhythm. I divided my time between the flickering monitors and methodical patrols of the ground floor, my boot falls amplifying unnervingly in the vast emptiness. The only company was the furtive scrabble of unseen rodents and the periodic groans of the structure settling into its bones. It must have been nearing 2. A distinct thump resonated from above, soft yet heavy, like a burden dropped onto the floorboards. I froze, the cone of my flashlight jittering across weeping brickwork as I strained to locate the origin. "Just the building," I whispered, the words tasting false even to myself, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Duty warred with a primal urge to stay put. Checking was the job. Yet the thought of ascending into that deeper darkness knotted my stomach. With conscious effort, I moved, my hand instinctively finding the reassuring weight of the stun gun holstered at my side. Each step on the complaining wooden stairs sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through my system. The second level was a realm of profound shadow, the moon's pale light struggling to pierce the layers of grime coating the tall windows. And then, a flicker, peripheral, swift, at the corridor's far end. My light snapped towards it, illuminating only empty air where something, or someone, had just vanished around a corner. "Identify yourself." My voice, aiming for authority, cracked slightly. "Security. Show yourself now." Only silence answered, thick and watchful. Then, undeniably, footfalls, not approaching but retreating, drawing me further into the factory's labyrinthine heart. Curiosity, that treacherous impulse, began to eclipse fear. Rounding the corner, I glimpsed a shape, humanoid, yet possessing a strangely disjointed gait, slipping into one of the dilapidated foreman's offices. "Hold it right there," I yelled, breaking into a clumsy run. But upon reaching the office doorway, I found it deserted. Or so it seemed. A scrape from behind spun me around. Emerging from the shadow of a hulking, rust-streaked filing cabinet stood a man. As my flashlight beam pinned him, a cold dread washed over me. He wasn't alone. 2 other figures materialized beside him, their eyes catching the harsh light like chips of obsidian. "Well now," the first man rasped, his voice like grinding stones. "Looks like the night shift showed up after all, boys." I retreated a step, my grip tightening on the stun gun. "Armed security," I managed, injecting a confidence I didn't possess. "You are trespassing. Vacate the premises immediately." He chuckled, a dry, grating sound that scraped along my nerves. Afraid we can't oblige. Got ourselves a nice little setup running here. Can't have you interfering. As my vision adjusted, the office's transformation became sickeningly clear. Glassware, tubing, burners, and canisters I couldn't identify littered every surface. The sharp, biting stench of volatile chemicals stung my nostrils. Realization hit like a physical blow. A clandestine laboratory. I'd walked straight into their nest. Look, I tried, raising my free hand, hoping for a placating effect. No trouble wanted. Let's just forget this happened. I saw nothing. The leader, his bearing marked him as such, gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head. Too late for that, friend. You've seen the whole operation. He gave a subtle nod to his companions, Carver, as I now thought of him. The other two, Finch and Rook, began to angle outwards, penning me in. The air crackled with imminent violence. 3-1, their territory. Panic dictated the only viable option, flight. I bolted, bursting from the office, my boots hammering a frantic rhythm on the worn floorboards as I sprinted back towards the stairwell. Their shouts pursued me, bouncing off the decaying walls. A backward glance near the stairs revealed the menacing gleam of polished steel in Rook's hand. Blade or barrel, it didn't matter. I plunged down the steps, taking them in reckless bounds, nearly tumbling in my haste. The security hut, the landline, was my only hope. My mobile was useless in this concrete tomb. I slammed onto the ground floor, launching myself towards the hut. Behind me, the heavy tread of my pursuers hit the bottom landing. I threw myself inside, slamming the flimsy door and ramming the chair beneath the knob, knowing it was a pathetic, temporary measure. My hands trembled violently as I snatched the receiver and stabbed at the emergency number. While the line connected, the men outside reached the door, their voices muffled but close. 911. State your emergency. Security, Blackwood Ironworks, I choked out. Intruders, trying to kill me. Send help. I rattled off the address, the dispatcher's calm assurances echoing hollowly against the rising panic. Hanging up felt like severing a lifeline. The door bucked as a heavy shoulder slammed against it. The chair groaned, wood splintering. My eyes just darted around the cramped space, searching for anything, any advantage. They landed on the bank of monitors. An idea, desperate and crude, sparked. I seized the heaviest monitor, ripping it free from its connections, trailing wires like entrails. Just as the door splintered inwards, I swung the heavy cathode ray tube with every ounce of strength I possessed. It met Carver's skull with a sickening, wet crunch. He collapsed instantly, a dead weight tripping Finch and Rook as they surged into the confined space. I didn't pause, shoving past the momentarily stunned pair, using the monitor like a blunt shield. I forced my way through. They stumbled back, surprised by the ferocity. That was my chance. I ran harder than I knew I could, out of the oppressive structure and into the blessedly cool night air. Distant sirens wailed, growing rapidly louder. I didn't stop, didn't dare look back, until I hit the main gate, wrenched it open, and stumbled onto the street just as the first patrol car's flashing lights painted the scene in strobes of red and blue. The hours that followed dissolved into a haze of police reports, paramedic checks, and adrenaline crash. They found the lab, apprehended Finch and Rook, but Carver, the leader, had vanished into the ensuing confusion. As dawn painted the sky in bruised pastels, I sat on the curb, wrapped in a scratchy shock blanket, watching the methodical swarm of law enforcement over the ironworks. Ilara arrived, her face etched with terror, and I pulled her close, feeling the gentle, insistent curve of her belly against me. The reason I'd taken the job, the reason I'd fought so hard to survive. I resigned that morning. No wage could justify that proximity to oblivion, could outweigh the future cradled within Ilara. Yet the night left its mark, an indelible alteration. It taught me the fragility of safety, the razor-thin membrane separating the mundane from mortal peril. Months later, holding our daughter, Lyra, her weight a solid, miraculous warmth in my arms, I'd recall the ironworks. I had confronted terror, outmaneuvered violence, endured. Gazing into Lyra's clear eyes, I knew I possessed a resilience I hadn't understood before, a strength to meet whatever came next. Still, sleep doesn't always come easy. Sometimes, in the deepest quiet of the night, I jerk us awake, phantom footsteps echoing in the hall, fleeting shadows coalescing in the corners of the room. The Blackwood Ironworks is a closed chapter, but its specters linger, a chilling testament to the night I stared into the abyss, and somehow, inexplicably, walked away. Yesterday dawned with the familiar throbs low in my spine, a dull complaint I needed absently as I drifted kitchenward. The house breathed its usual early morning sighs, and cool air settling, the ghost of last night's supper clinging faintly to the stillness. An unremarkable quiet until the hallway. Passing the spare room, my steps faltered. There, interrupting the known geography of my home, stood a door where no door had ever been. To the left, nestled disturbingly close to the linen closet, where only blank, familiar plaster ought to reside, it asserted itself. Plain, dark timber, scarred by time, crowned with a tarnished brass knob, an impossible fixture. A tremor began in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs, as a cold dew slicked my brow. My gaze locked onto it, ransacking memory for any hint, any forgotten explanation. None surfaced. This portal was an interloper, utterly new. Moving towards it felt like wading through unseen currents, each footfall heavy, reluctant. My hand, trembling slightly, reached for the faded knob. Cold metal met my palm. It refused purchase, yielding neither right nor left, a stubborn, locked finality. I pressed my ear to the wood grain, straining against the rush of my own blood. A whisper of sound, perhaps? A dry skittering, a faint drag, or merely that echo of my own frantic pulse amplified in the hollow cavity of my ear. I held my breath, silencing my own noisy existence, but the phantom sound vanished with my exhale. Bracing myself, I leaned a shoulder into the unyielding wood, not the yielding gov of a normal door, but a dense, resonant thud, like striking petrified timber. The impact jarred back up my arm, a peculiar hum vibrating through bone. It felt too solid, unnervingly so. Crouching, I peered at the threshold. A hairline fissure separated door from floor, a sliver of darkness barely discernible, perhaps a shadow, perhaps the dimmest hint of the space beyond. With slick palms, I wrestled the knob again, sharp, futile jerks. The sheer wrongness of it coiled in my gut. Houses don't spontaneously generate apertures. As my grip slackened, a distinct, albeit faint pressure met my release. A subtle countershove from within, deliberate, firm. My breath hitched. The frantic drumming in my chest intensified. I recoiled, wiping my damp hands on my trousers, eyes fixed on the impassive wood. A frantic energy propelled me to the garage's cluttered depths. Behind forgotten paint tins, the cold steel of a crowbar offered a promise of force. Back in the hallway, the door waited, unchanged, silent. I jammed the tool's tip beneath the lower edge. Poor leverage. Tried the jam. The gap was too narrow, mocking my efforts, scoring the frame's paint. Each attempt to gain purchase met that same dense, almost sentient resistance, the metal skittering uselessly off the obdurate wood. A strange energy seemed to rebound with every blow. My muscles screamed, trembling with exertion, sweat stinging my eyes until breathless and dizzy, I finally let the crowbar clatter to the floor. My thoughts tangled. Was this a waking dream, a fissure in my own memory? But no, this house, aged and familiar, held no secrets like this. I knew its bones. Seeking an anchor in the mundane, I called Silas, a contractor friend. I skirted the truth, murmuring about a stuck door, hinges, perhaps removal, a deflection. He promised to swing by later. Relief warred with a strange reluctance. Did I truly want corroboration? Midday brought a text. Silas delayed another job. The anchor slipped away, leaving me adrift again with my impossible door. The hours crawled. I became a restless ghost in my own home, orbiting the hallway anomaly. Each circuit ended at the door. An ear pressed again to the grain. Silence. A tentative rap of knuckles. Nothing. A harder series of knocks, answered only by the echo in the confined space and the frantic pulse in my ears. Back and forth I went, a moth drawn to a dark flame, testing the knob, pulling, retreating. A knot tightened in my stomach with every failed attempt, my breath growing shallow. The door stood impassive, monumental in its stillness, mocking my agitation. Night bled through the windows. I couldn't bear the thought of that portal lurking in darkness, so the hallway light burned, a lonely sentinel. Sleep was a shallow, troubled affair, punctuated by phantom noises. Was that a muffled thump? I strained my ears in the pre-dawn quiet, hearing only the house settling. Morning finally broke, heavy-lidded and gray. A primal urgency propelled me from bed, stumbling towards the hallway. I stopped dead. Blankness, smooth, uninterrupted plaster where the door had stood. Gone. My hands flew to the surface, tracing the cool, familiar texture of aged plaster. No seam, no outline, no hidden catch. Solid. Utterly, maddeningly normal. A dry rasp in my throat, but it had been there. The weight of it, the cold knob, the stubborn resistance. These sensations lingered, vivid ghosts against the undeniable reality of the seamless wall. No scratches from the crowbar marred the frame. No chipped paint. Nothing. Had I dreamt it? A feverish invention? Yet the faint ache persisted in my shoulder. A physical echo of my impact, against its unyielding surface, a phantom limb of memory. My days lost their rhythm. Routine tasks felt hollow, my attention perpetually snagged by the hallway. Down in the dusty chill of the basement, flashlight beam cutting the gloom, I scanned the foundation beneath the affected area. Solid concrete, undisturbed beams, nothing. Upstairs, armed with a tape measure, I meticulously recorded dimensions. Hallway, adjacent room. A discrepancy emerged, slight, perhaps mere inches, unaccounted for by standard construction. Not enough for a room, but a sliver of unexplained space. Tapping the wall in the spare room yielded a faintly different resonance in one spot. A subtle hollowness. The urge to tear into the plaster surged, fierce and immediate, yet tempered by a chilling apprehension of what, or what nothing, I might find. Attempts to articulate the anomaly to friends, carefully edited to sound like mundane structural concerns, met with amusement or dismissal. Jokes about hidden safes, suggestions to ease off unsettling fiction. Their casual disbelief only deepened my isolation. Now I catch my reflection staring down the hallway, a strange mix of dread and perverse longing twisting inside me. Would it return? The memory of that subtle, internal pressure against the door, that presence, sends a cold ripple across my skin, tightens my chest, quickens my breath. I've become a prisoner of vigilance, rarely venturing far. Mornings and nights are bookended by the ritual check of the wall. My life's cadence is broken. The familiar silence of the house now feels charged, expectant. Shadows pool deeper in corners. Floorboards creak with unfamiliar weight. At night, faint ticks and scrapes prick the quiet, freezing me in bed listening. This place, once a sanctuary, now feels like a liminal space, holding its breath. The crowbar rests in the linen closet, cold comfort. One part of me craves the violent certainty of demolition, of exposing whatever lies beneath the plaster. Another, colder part whispers caution, dreading the confirmation of the impossible or the desolation of finding nothing at all. The unknowing is a torment, yet perhaps a preferable one. So I remain, waiting. The wall stays stubbornly blank each dawn, yet the conviction persists. It was there, tangible, real. That knowledge is an indelible brand. I cannot prove it, cannot share it, can only live with its spectral weight. I keep watch, compelled by the memory of cold brass under my palm, the solid thud of resistant wood, the phantom pressure from the other side. Should that dark timber ever bloom again in the familiar plaster, I don't know if courage or terror will prevail. Will I finally breach the threshold, or will I simply stand witness, paralyzed by the return of the impossible? The question hangs, unanswered, in the quiet air of my altered home. Toward day's end, I drifted into the settlement. Emptiness reigned. No soul stirred upon the track leading between the stone-built dwellings. Some structures boasted ancient wooden doors, heavy shutters clamped tight against the world. No automobiles scarred the lanes, no lamps pierced the encroaching twilight. A biting chill permeated the air, and beyond the rooftops, the stark silhouettes of hills clawed at the fading sky. Fatigue weighed heavy on my limbs, a consequence of the long trek. My pack felt meager, spare garments, a torch, a half-empty flask of water. Shelter was paramount. One house, seemingly forsaken, drew my gaze. Its walls were crudely assembled stone, the portals a diminutive plank door. Windows, narrow slits sunk deep, held panes of warped, uneven glass. I tested the door. It yielded with a groan. Inside, the air hung thick, redolent of damp rock and time-settled dust. A single ground-floor chamber offered minimal comfort. A plain table, one solitary chair, a hearth cold and dark. From a corner, cramped stairs spiraled upward. I ascended, my boots protesting on the worn treads. The upper room contained a cot fitted with a meager mattress, a small timber chest, and a window framing the somber hills. A simple iron latch secured its door. The floorboards beneath me were warped, creaking testimonies to age. The bed, at least, felt dry. Unburdening myself, I arranged my few possessions upon the chest, intending only a night's respite before resuming my journey at dawn. As the sun bled below the horizon, a wind began to rise, whispering, then keening through the ill-fitting window frame. The chamber grew colder still. Perched on the cot's edge, I peered out. Moonlight, stark and brilliant, etched the terrain in monochrome relief. Near a line of huddled houses, several obscure forms materialized. Like statues they stood, utterly immobile. I watched them, straining through the gloom. Faces remained indistinct, attire indiscernible. A protracted moment passed. When I glanced away, then back, the space they occupied was vacant once more. Night fell absolute. Darkness consumed the room. Igniting my torch, I inspected the door's latch, sturdy enough it seemed. Outside, the wind gathered fury, rattling the window pane violently. The glass shuddered. The wooden frame groaned as if strained to its breaking point. For a sliver more security, I wedged the chair beneath the door handle. A profound unease settled over me. No voices, no footfalls reached my ears, only the ceaseless lament of the wind. Then, a low resonance from beyond the window. Not speech, but a faint, pervasive thrumming. A vibration felt more than heard. Dousing the torch, I pressed close to the glass. Shapes drifted outside, stark silhouettes against the lunar glow. Several figures, swaying rhythmically. Their limbs stirred in a slow, deliberate cadence. I squinted, seeking features. Leaning nearer, I discerned their eyes, milky voids, blank bone-white surfaces fixed directly upon me. I recoiled, heart hammering against my ribs, fingers gripping the sill. A ragged breath. No words emanated from them, yet the air pulsed with a silent, sibilant chant, too soft, too alien for language, a mere tremor hanging in the night. The gale slammed the window anew, the glass bowed inward. A faint rasping sound reached me, seemingly from below, from beneath the floor. Crouching, I pressed my ear to the uneven boards. Faint, yet undeniable. A scuttling, a scraping, something sliding beneath my feet. An animal, perhaps? A rat? No, the sound possessed a weight, a deliberation that belied vermin. I rose, casting a nervous glance at the door. The chair remained braced, the latch held firm. Opening it felt unthinkable. What waited in the darkness beyond? My torch beam stabbed into the room's corners. Bare stone walls offered no solace. The chest at the cot's foot stood solid. I lifted its lid. Within lay a folded blanket and a small, tarnished metal box, utterly empty. I retrieved the blanket, spreading it over the thin mattress, attempting to quell the rising panic. I listened intently. Outside, the winds howl in that strange, subsonic vibration, rising and falling without discernible pattern. Inside, the furniture groaned, protesting the strain. The cot itself trembled slightly, as if the very floor beneath shifted. Placing a hand on the frame, I felt it, a vibration emanating from below, transmitted through the floorboards. Lifting a corner of the threadbare rug revealed a board looser than its neighbors. I pressed down. It resisted. Pulling risked noise I dared not make. Outside, the shapes persisted. Approaching the window confirmed their presence, moving with glacial slowness, eternally oriented towards my refuge. Their eyes, never blinking, seemed to absorb the moonlight. Their heads tilted in uncanny unison as they rocked. A tentative tap of my finger on the glass elicited no reaction. Just the ceaseless motion, the unheard hum. Were their mouths moving? Impossible to tell. Only silhouettes and those pallid, watchful orbs. A sudden pressure built in my ears, the air itself growing heavy, dense. The sound beneath the floor intensified, a clearer scraping now, accompanied by a low, grinding noise. I retreated from the room's center, pressing my back against the cold stone wall, torch held like a talisman, beam aimed at the floor. The boards visibly quivered. Dust motes danced in the light, rising from the seams. My pulse thundered. Escape seemed imperative, yet the figures outside might guard the exit. Soundlessly, I crept to the door, ear pressed against the wood. Silence from the landing. Hesitantly, I drew back the chair, lifted the latch. Opening the door, a mere crack revealed impenetrable darkness on the stairwell descending below. I listened again. Nothing within the house save the timber's complaints and the insidious noise beneath my feet. Holding the torch low, I ventured onto the landing. The steps felt treacherous beneath my boots. Downstairs, the main room was glacial, void. My light swept across the table and chair, unchanged. The fireplace remained a black maw. I checked the exterior door, shut fast. The handle refused to turn. I pulled with more force. Immovable. Pushing yielded nothing. Directing the beam along the door's edges revealed they were sealed, plastered over with something resembling dried, cracked mud. My fingernails scraped against it, hard as stone. No tool offered itself to chip it away. Trapped. A sharp crack echoed from upstairs. Wood splintering. I scrambled back up, bursting into the room. The loose floorboard had lifted further, revealing a distinct gap. Something was actively pushing from the void below, a length of wood, perhaps, or something else entirely. I shone the torch beam directly into the opening. Darkness swam there, and something pale, formless, which instantly withdrew from the light's touch. I backed away, steadying the trembling torch. My hands slicked with sweat, throat parched. A shuffling commenced beneath the floor, moving towards the wall, circling the room's perimeter with persistent scraping and tapping. With a grunt of effort, I dragged the heavy chest over the loose board, hoping to block the intrusion. The noise it made was deafening in the charged silence. I froze, listening. The subterranean sound paused, then resumed its relentless circuit. The chanting outside seemed to swell, or perhaps it merely resonated deeper within my own skull. Gripping the torch, I stared at the window. The silhouettes were closer now, pressed almost against the exterior wall. Their eyes bored into the room. No mouths moved, yet the hum felt louder, more palpable. I avoided their gaze. The pale orbs seemed to possess their own luminescence. The wind shrieked, and the windows seemed poised to shatter. A sudden, forceful jolt from below. The chest slid fractionally. I braced my foot against it, but it shifted again. Whatever lurked beneath possessed considerable strength. Floorboards groaned, threatening to split. Frantically, I scanned the room for additional weight. The cot was too light, the chair inadequate. Leaving the room again felt futile. The sealed door below, the unknown layout of the rest of the house. Stone walls surrounded me. The entire structure felt like a tomb. Leaning onto the chest with my full weight, I felt the vibrations course through me. My heart pounded erratically. Breath came in ragged gasps. Then the tapping began. At the window, soft at first, then insistent, like fingernails skittering across glass. Tiny fractures spiderwebbed across the pane. I directed the torch beam towards the sound. The shapes flinched, pulling back slightly, but they did not depart. The tapping resumed, slow, rhythmic, relentless. Crack! The floorboard beneath the chest gave way. I leapt back, stumbling on the rug. The chest tilted precariously. A long, slender object thrust upward through the gap. It appeared grayish, rough-textured, like a desiccated limb or a piece of gnarled ancient wood. It twisted, scraping against the chest's side. Instinctively, I kicked at it. My boot connected. The object jerked back, vanishing below. A final rasping scrape, then silence from that quarter. I gasped for air, chest tight, wiped clammy sweat from my brow. The window shuddered under renewed assault. A small piece of glass tinkled inward, falling to the floor. A tiny aperture appeared. Cold air streamed in. Through the hole, I saw one of those pale, vacant eyes peering directly at me. I stumbled back, raising the torch. Shining the beam into the eye caused the figure outside to recoil, moving away from the breach. The light, it deterred them. I kept the beam fixed on the window. Beneath the floor, the scraping resumed, moving towards a corner. A dull, thudding sound, then stillness. I stood rigid, torch beam sweeping between the window and the gap in the floor, waiting. The unheard chant persisted, a pressure behind my eyes. The silhouette swayed, keeping a slight distance from the hole in the glass now, tapping instead on the wooden frame, testing its integrity. I held the light steady, forcing them back. How long would the torch batteries last? A chilling thought pushed aside. The wind howled, roof timbers groaned overhead. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. Focus was essential. Sleep, impossible. I paced the confines of the small room, a caged animal. Checked the gap again, still partially open, mostly blocked by the chest. I swept the light across it. Nothing stirred. My legs ached, but sitting felt too vulnerable. The tapping, the scraping, the humming, a terrifying symphony accompanying the wind's fury. My heart raced, my breathing shallow. After an age, a subtle shift. The blackness outside softened, conceding to the faintest pre-dawn gray. The wind, though still fierce, seemed less malevolent. Outside, the silhouettes drew back, melting into the deeper shadows near the other dwellings. Their humming faded, subsided. I watched them retreat, spectral forms dissolving into the gloom, leaving the space outside my window blessedly empty. The tapping ceased. Below the floor, one final faint scrape, then profound silence. I waited, torch aimed at the gap, but nothing emerged. Only the wind remained, whistling through the structure's myriad cracks, now sounding merely like wind. Cautiously, I approached the window, looked out upon empty space, the stark outlines of stone houses against a lightning sky. The figures were gone. Decision made, I descended the stairs once more to confront the sealed door. Examining the crude plaster, I found a splintered leg from the broken chair upstairs. Using it as a makeshift chisel, I began chipping away at the hardened mud. Minutes passed in frantic exertion until finally the latch yielded. I wrenched the door open. Cold morning air flooded the cramped space. Clean, sharp, real. The street outside lay deserted, silent. No figures, no eyes, no unnatural movement disturbed the scene. I stepped across the threshold, leaving the house and its horrors behind. Relief washed over me, the vastness of the open sky a balm. Without a backward glance towards the window or the violated floor, I walked away, putting distance between myself and that place, faster and faster, until the village was behind me. No one saw me leave. It remained a place of cold stone and profound silence. I pressed onward, vowing never to seek shelter there again. That first time, I recall the stillness breaking, not with a sound, but with a motion, a faint, almost imperceptible torsion at the waist of the stone figure. Midnight had long settled, the air within the old garden walls tasting thick and uncirculated, heavy with the dust of ages. I, Elias, had crept from the confines of my small guest quarters, lured by an insistent dry scratching near the patio. 2 months I'd haunted this place, a spectral caretaker tending roses choked by bindweed, hacking back the ivy's relentless siege upon the weathered brick. A stopgap measure, this role, offered by someone, a connection perhaps, more than a friend, to whom I owed a vague debt, a chance to gather the scattered fragments of my existence. Why I'd accepted remains a question shrouded in the fog of desperation. Barefoot on the frigid flagstones, I moved that night, the frantic pulse in my temples echoing the unease tightening my chest. Moonlight warped the familiar shapes of topiary and toolshed. Shadows writhed at the periphery of my sight, alive and sinuous. The statue, sentinel at the garden's far end, had always faced the derelict, vine-strangled trellis. I'd paid it little heed beyond noting its unsettling smoothness, an ovoid blank where features should reside, as though the sculptor had abandoned the task mid-stroke. Yet now, shivering in the lunar glare, I perceived something else. The stone wasn't inert. Faint contours ghosted beneath its surface, the nascent suggestion of an expression struggling towards form. A hesitant advance, arms wrapped tight against a chill deeper than the night air. Leaning closer, vision straining, I grasped the truth. It possessed a face, or rather, wrestled with the idea of one. In the wan illumination, Fleeting impressions surfaced: the troubled brow of an old man, sunken cheeks, the hint of a lip curled in disdain. I blinked and the visage dissolved, reforming into the tear-streaked anguish of a woman. A knot tightened low in my belly. I stumbled backward, bootless feet fumbling, nearly upending a shovel propped against the shed wall. While my gaze remained fixed, the statue held its pose, yet an overwhelming certainty gripped me. Turn away, and it would incline further. My breath came raggedly. I pressed a hand to my hammering heart. Silence reigned, absolute save for my own gasping inhalations and the papery rustle of unseen leaves. Morning light brought fragile rationality. A waking dream, I insisted. Exhaustion, surely. The ceaseless toil, pruning, sweeping dead foliage, clearing paths long surrendered to nature, had taken its toll. My life preceding this had been a frantic scramble, a flight from accumulating failures. Perhaps my nerves were simply frayed thin. Throughout the day, I navigated the garden with deliberate caution, keeping the statue at the edge of my awareness while I focused on my duties. Snipping thorny rose canes, gathering fallen petals into baskets, I fought the urge to look. Yet inevitably, my eyes strayed. Each furtive glance seemed to reveal some new nuance upon its stone countenance. A web of fine lines creasing the forehead, a faint cicatrix tracing the curve of a potential cheek. An unseen artisan, it seemed, refined the work nightly while I slept. By noon, its stance felt altered. No longer perfectly aligned with the trellis, it seemed fractionally angled, subtly oriented towards the door I used to access the house. I shook my head, denying the perception, sweat stinging my temples. Later, as the sun bled gold across the lawn, I found myself lingering by the drawing room window, observing. A small, tarnished hand mirror, discovered earlier that week in a forgotten drawer, became my instrument. From within the house, I angled its reflection, a spyglass, onto the garden, hoping to catch the statue unawares. Breath held, so I waited. Stillness. Yet something about its posture felt weighted, imbued with a forward tension, poised as if to impart some dreadful confidence. Sleep that night was a turbulent affair, sheets twisting damply around me. The room's musty scent, old wood, decaying fabric, clung oppressively. Several times I jolted awake, convinced of footfalls on the stone patio. Once, a low grating sound, like stone scraping brick, seemed to emanate from just outside. Rising finally, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I swept the darkness beyond the window with a torch beam. Nothing disturbed the quiet tableau, but morning revealed fresh alterations. The statue's face now bore a gaunt intensity, lips parted in a silent summons. A sequence of minuscule marks, like arcane symbols or ritual scars, traced its jawline. Their meaning eluded me, yet they radiated unease. The sensation of being watched intensified, becoming a constant pressure at the base of my skull. Was it merely eccentric weathering, cracks forming patterns that mimicked features? The thought arose to shroud it, conceal it beneath a tarpaulin, but a deeper instinct recoiled. To provoke it felt unwise, fraught with unknown consequences. Several nights later, resolve hardened within me. As dusk painted the sky in bruised violets, I stepped outside clutching a large linen sheet. A tremor ran through my legs. My palms felt slick against the folded fabric. The statue's face, or faces, for it never settled, was caught mid-metamorphosis, hovering between a scowl and a sneer. Closer I crept, breath catching in shallow bursts. Its posture was undeniably wrong now, tilted towards me, imbued with a terrible eagerness. My heart hammered against my ribs. A swift glance confirmed my solitude. The house stood dark and mute behind me. I was alone with this thing. Slowly, fumblingly, I raised the sheet, attempting to drape it over the figure's head and shoulders. My fingers brushed the stone. It felt unnervingly warm, radiating a latent heat despite the cooling air, as if it had basked all day in a sun that hadn't shone. For an instant, a definite shift, a subtle yielding beneath my touch. A strangled gasp escaped me. I snatched my hand back as if burned, the sheet slithering to the ground. Staggering away, I nearly tripped over a forgotten rake, my skin prickling with alarm. I tried again, but the will failed me. Some primal warning screamed against direct contact. That night descended into a maelstrom of fractured nightmares. I woke repeatedly, pulse frantic, certain of whispers just beyond the glass, though the rising wind clawed at the walls with branches like skeletal fingers. The little mirror became my constant companion. Its surface consulted before venturing into the hall for water. Its reflection scanned before turning my back. I half expected to see the statue pressed close to the window, its cracked visage peering in. Morning brought a chilling evolution. Distinct grooves like bulging veins now striated the statue's neck. The eyes, previously abstract hollows, held shallow depressions suggesting pupils. Nausea churned within me. My stomach revolted, the back of my neck flushing hot. Food was impossible. The mere sight of the figure induced a cold sweat. It knew me, somehow. I felt its scrutiny, a cold assessment cataloging my anxieties, awaiting the precise moment to unveil some horror I could not bear. Hours were lost indoors that day, sifting through brittle papers unearthed from a chest near the stairs. What I sought I couldn't articulate. An explanation, a history, anything. Mostly receipts, faded correspondence, an ancient inventory of gardening tools. One letter, penned in spidery script, mentioned the statue obliquely. The groundsman holds the stone figure predates the house itself, it read. He professes it alters, though I confess I have not observed such myself. I slammed the drawer shut, pulse accelerating. Not the first, then. The thought tightened my throat. If others had witnessed this, why was there no record of resolution? As darkness gathered once more, a sense of being cornered intensified. My heart beat like a snared bird against my ribs. Every creak of the floorboards, every snap of a distant twig made me jump. Rationality warred with rising panic. Action was imperative. Leaving felt like the only sane choice, yet I had no destination, no haven readied. The urge to shatter the statue arose, swiftly followed by a surge of profound dread. What if destruction unleashed something worse? Armed with the torch and the small mirror tucked securely in my pocket, I ventured out. The quiet was charged, electric, pregnant with imminent storm. I approached with measured steps. The statue now seemed undeniably anthropomorphic, yet its face remained fluid, ancient sage, weary mother, a grimacing mask of agony and malice. It leaned forward at an alarming angle, seemingly defying gravity. My legs shook, sweat traced cold paths down my spine. I directed the torch beam onto its face. For a suspended moment, it remained inert. Then a flicker, a minute contraction, as if gathering breath to speak. My throat constricted. Raising the mirror, I angled it, observing the reflection without meeting its direct gaze. Distorted in the antique glass, I saw it. The stone lips drew apart. No sound reached me, only the impression of sound, a dry, grating whisper, like stone grinding stone. Thunder filled my ears. Flight screamed through my nerves, but my limbs felt weighted, immovable. I retreated a step. The statue seemed to mirror the movement, inclining infinitesimally further. Intolerable. Seizing the linen sheet still crumpled near the trellis, I flung it desperately. This time it caught, shrouding the head. The rough outline of features pressed outwards against the fabric, bulging as if striving for release. I staggered back, overcome by dizziness, the night air suddenly too dense to draw into my lungs. Bile rose, sharp and acrid. Then, without volition, the sheet slid away, drifting softly to the earth. The statue stood revealed, momentarily blank, featureless, a fleeting mockery. Before my eyes, it began to sculpt a new visage, an expression I knew intimately, my own. A choked sound escaped me. Tears burned. It was mimicking my fear, my exhaustion, casting my inner turmoil in cold, unyielding stone. Escape. I bolted indoors, slamming and locking the door behind me. Chest heaving, I slumped against the wall, drenched in cold perspiration. In the hallway mirror, a small oval one near the coat hooks, a flicker of movement behind me. I spun, finding only empty air. Yet my reflection seemed subtly altered. My eyes looked deeper set, shadowed. A faint discoloration, like a bruise, bloomed beneath my left eye. My own face, already worn, now bore an unnerving echo of the statue's transient horrors. Dawn approached, but sleep remained elusive. The window panes rattled faintly. Peering out, I saw only the statue's silhouette against the paling sky, its posture ambiguous in the dim light. My stomach twisted. Departure was essential. Perhaps tomorrow, I vowed. This place, this vigil, was corroding my sanity. But as I turned from the window, my gaze snagged on the hallway mirror. Its surface showed the statue, impossibly relocated, standing directly beneath the window, pressed close to the house. Inches from the glass, it leaned inwards. My heart seized. A direct look outside confirmed its original position, distant and still. Yet the reflected image lingered, seared into my mind. Now, even attempting composure, I find no peace. My vision plays tricks. My skin feels perpetually tight, feverish. Every quick glance into a reflective surface, a window after dark, the polished gleam of a doorknob, the tarnished face of the hand mirror, threatens to reveal its countenance superimposed on mine, carved with dreadful clarity, the scars, the ciphers, the ever-shifting eyes. It has learned me intimately, and it is not finished, so the peril has not receded. Every reflection, every nervous glance over my shoulder delivers the same silent message. It waits, and it is closer than I can bear to imagine. The hospital exhaled me past midnight, a spent husk adrift in the humid West Virginia air. Weariness had sunk its teeth deep into my bones. Home beckoned from beyond Charleston, down a length of highway that threaded through slumbering, unlit hills, a solitary ribbon of asphalt whose quietude I'd always cherished. But tonight, the quiet felt different, brittle. Inside my car, the familiar click of the seatbelt, the engine's low thrum mingling with the radio's phantom static. Outside the cone of my headlights, darkness reigned absolute. I steered onto the deserted road, urging away the exhaustion that clung like grave dust, my gaze fixed forward. Perhaps 10 minutes dissolved into the rearview mirror before twin orbs of light ignited behind me. Another late traveler, I assumed, nothing more. Yet mile after mile, those lights didn't recede or overtake. They swelled, burning fiercely, too near, a blinding pressure in the mirror. Annoyance flickered first, then bloomed into a cold unease. This empty expanse offered no reason for such relentless proximity. A light tap on my brakes, a silent plea for space. The response? A harsh, deliberate flash of high beams. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. My pulse quickened its beat. The vehicle itself remained a shapeless specter behind the glare. Be calm, I told myself. Impatient, lost, maybe. But the insistent closeness, the way it mirrored my every slight change in speed, whispered a more sinister truth. I was being followed. A steadying breath, though my hands felt unsteady. Gas gauge, half full, ample fuel. Just keep driving, I reasoned. They'll turn off eventually. But the sheer persistence of the pursuit, the unwavering proximity, made my skin crawl. Miles bled together under their scrutiny. Then a decision, sharp and sudden. A narrow side road loomed, leading to an old, abandoned service station. A test. If they took this detour, my heart hammered against my ribs as I swung the wheel. Behind me, the headlights slowed, paused, then followed suit. Nausea twisted in my stomach. This was no accident. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead as I pulled into the station's cracked, empty lot, parking beneath the feeble glow of its single functioning security light. I cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the frantic thrumming in my ears. I watched the entrance waiting. For a breathless moment, only darkness. Had they given up? Relief flickered, fragile. Then headlights extinguished. A car ghosted into the lot, easing to a halt several spaces away. A dark silhouette, windows impenetrably tinted. It sat there, engine murmuring softly, an obsidian presence waiting. Trapped, options flitted through my panicked mind. Confront them? Madness? Call someone? Who at this hour, this far out? Stay put, doors locked, eyes riveted to the silent car. Minutes stretched, elastic and agonizing. My phone felt heavy in my hand. 911? What would I report? A car? Sitting? They hadn't moved, hadn't threatened, yet their stillness screamed intent. The waiting became unbearable. Trembling fingers turned the key. The engine coughed to life. I eased out of the lot, turning back toward the highway, praying they'd remain. But the instant my tires hit the main road, the twin beams flared to life behind me. Closer now, practically fused to my bumper, blindingly intense. Panic surged, a metallic taste in my mouth. What did they want? Why? Escape was the only imperative. I pressed the accelerator, the engine whining in protest. My eyes darted between the road ahead and the searing glare filling the rear view. Faster, faster, but they matched me, glued to my wake. I wrenched the wheel, taking a winding back road, hoping the curves might shake them. Futile. They navigated each twist, each turn with unnerving familiarity, as if they knew this labyrinth better than I. Sweat slicked my palms. Breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. The darkness outside pressed in, suffocating, and those relentless lights burned into my vision. Ahead, a faint track materialized. A dirt road, little more than a trail, cutting sharply right into the woods. Without conscious thought, I took it, tires churning gravel and dust. For one blessed second, I thought I'd lost them. The headlights vanished. Only the dim shapes of trees flanked me as the trail snaked deeper into shadow. Then, abruptly, the lights were back, closer than ever, as if they'd anticipated the maneuver, lying in wait. Terror hammered within me. I knew these county roads, but this trail was alien territory. Where did it lead? Did it offer any escape? Driving became pure instinct, focused solely on increasing the distance. Suddenly, the trail simply ended. Brakes slammed, the car skidding to a halt in a small clearing, hemmed in by dense woods. No way forward, just earth, trees, and a suffocating silence. Engine off, listening. My entire body coiled tight. The headlights behind me had stopped at the clearing's edge. I could see the car now, dark, hulking, its beams slicing through the trees, casting long, dancing shadows. I held my breath, watching, waiting. They didn't move, just watched. Run into that impenetrable blackness? Stay? A target exposed and helpless. Slowly, agonizingly, the car began to inch forward, creeping across the clearing, closing the gap. A fresh wave of panic crested. Action now. Deep breath. Engine roared back to life. Reverse. Tires spun, clawing at the dirt. I swerved violently around them, slammed the gear shift into drive and floored it, hurtling back down the treacherous trail, refusing to look back. Behind me, I heard their engine surge, the sound of tires scrabbling, resuming the chase, relentless, unyielding. I pushed my car to its limit, eyes straining in the darkness, knuckles locked white on the wheel. The narrow trail bucked and twisted. Every bump, every turn threatened disaster, but slowing down wasn't an option. Their lights still burned in my mirror, oppressively close. Back onto the main road, speed unchecked, the sole thought distance. The headlights followed, a persistent torment. Then, as suddenly as they had first appeared, they extinguished, gone. I didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't dare glance back until my own driveway embraced the car. I sat there, engine ticking, darkness absolute, heart pounding a wild rhythm against my ribs, trying to reclaim my breath, trying to understand. Then, a casual glance in the rearview mirror. My blood turned to ice. There, on the back seat, stark against the dark fabric, lay a folded piece of paper. My hand, trembling uncontrollably, reached back, unfolded it. Shaky, scrawled handwriting declared, "See you soon." I scrambled out, fumbled with my keys, bolted inside, slammed and locked the door. The police came, listened, searched, found nothing, no trace of the car, no explanation. Weeks have passed, silence. But the fear lingers, a cold residue. Every time I slide behind the wheel, My eyes flick instinctively to the back seat. Every drive is shadowed by a dreadful anticipation, waiting for those twin lights to bloom once more in the darkness behind me. That first taste, an unnervingly saccharine bloom on my tongue, laced with something metallic, almost alkaline, signaled the beginning of the end, though awareness dawned too late. Already the world swam, a viscous tide pulling at my limbs, blurring the edges of the opulent lobby. Through the haze, I registered the hotel attendants, their meticulously crafted welcomes dissolving into masks of cold intent. This sun-drenched idol, this haven promised in glossy brochures, was swiftly decaying into a trap. It began, as such things often do, with desire. My wife Clara and I had scrimped, saved, dreamt for months of an escape. Then the offer materialized, the azure haven, 5 stars gleaming against a backdrop of impossible turquoise at a price that felt like theft. Reviews sang its praises. Photographs depicted nirvana. We surrendered to the siren call of affordability. Arrival was a sun-struck dream. Waves whispered secrets against the nearby shore as we stepped into a cathedral of cool marble and shimmering glass, dominated by a chandelier like captured starlight. Immediately, an attendant materialized, proffering 2 slender glasses filled with liquid the color of twilight deepening over the sea. Our signature refreshment, she purred, smile unwavering. A taste of local paradise. I drank. The sweetness was immediate, overwhelming, yet beneath it lay that discordant, bitter whisper I couldn't identify. An exotic fruit, perhaps? I dismissed the prickle of unease, attributing it to unfamiliarity. During check-in, the staff's solicitousness felt intense. Their gazes lingered. Their smiles seemed pinned in place. Exemplary service, I told myself then. Now the memory chills me. Oh, to have heeded that nascent intuition. Our suite defied expectation. A cavernous bed draped in white, a balcony that drank in the endless ocean expanse, a bathroom larger than our city apartment. That initial day passed in a blissful blur, exploring crystalline pools, wandering the private crescent of beach, surveying the constellation of restaurants. The strangeness began its insidious creep at dinner. A fog settled in my mind, my movements turning sluggish, deliberate. Clara confessed to a similar lethargy. Jet lag, we concluded, compounded by the potent tropical sun. An early night seemed prudent. Morning brought not clarity, but deeper disquiet. We awoke to find a uniformed man silently replenishing the minibar. When questioned, he offered only that immutable smile before gliding out, wordless. At breakfast, the other guests were a disturbing tableau. They drifted, moved like automata, their eyes glazed, unfocused. An attempt to engage the couple at an adjacent table yielded only pre-recorded platitudes about the resort's perfection. Turning to share my mounting dread with Clara, I found her staring, vacant, into her untouched fruit plate. Clara? My voice was tight. I touched her arm. She looked up, but her eyes were hollow pools, reflecting nothing, mirroring the unnerving emptiness I'd seen in the others. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs. This place, this beautiful, terrible place, was fundamentally wrong. Murmuring an excuse about needing air, I fled the dining terrace. Crossing the lobby, my gaze snagged on a door, discreetly marked staff only, standing slightly ajar. A quick, furtive glance confirmed I was unobserved. I slipped through. The transition was jarring. Opulent warmth gave way to stark, aseptic corridors bathed in the merciless glare of fluorescent tubes. Muffled voices drifted from a room further down. Compelled by a dreadful curiosity, I crept closer, hugging the sterile wall. Latest acquisition cohort shows excellent receptivity. A male voice stated, clinical and detached. Phase 2 protocols can commence by 0800 tomorrow. Superb, a woman replied, her tone crisp, devoid of emotion. The investors require results. This new formulation demonstrates significantly improved compliance metrics. Investors? Formulation? A frigid dread seeped into my bones. Peering cautiously around the doorframe, my stomach revolted at the sight. A laboratory, stark and functional, stretched before me. Rows of beds held motionless figures, guests, I realized with a jolt, tethered to humming machines and IV drips. White-coated attendants moved among them with chilling efficiency, adjusting dials, making notations. A gasp, involuntary, escaped my lips. Every head in the room snapped towards me. The smiles vanished instantly, replaced by cold, appraising scrutiny. Well, the woman observed, her voice like chipped ice. It appears we have an unscheduled observer. Secure him. I bolted, adrenaline momentarily overriding the drug's leaden grip, but my legs felt disconnected, unresponsive. Halfway down the corridor, rough hands seized me, dragging me inexorably back towards the humming, sterile nightmare. They wrestled me onto an empty bed, cinching restraints around my wrists and ankles, ignoring my desperate struggles and choked protests. The woman approached, a hypodermic needle glinting in her hand. A pity, she murmured, tilting her head slightly. You might have enjoyed a truly restful stay. Circumstances dictate, however, that your participations in our little project begin somewhat prematurely. Fire erupted in my vein as the needle pierced my skin, a burning tide surging through me. The room began to tilt and spin, the clinical voices warping into distorted echoes. What are you doing? I forced the words past numb lips. Her smile returned, a terrifyingly empty gesture. Advancing the future, my dear guest. Cognitive recalibration, physiological enhancement, behavioral optimization, and you fortunate souls are the pioneers. The truth struck with visceral force, not a resort, a facade, a harvesting ground for illicit human experimentation. As darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating, my last conscious thought was of Clara. Was she lost already? Would I ever see her conscious, truly conscious again? How long I remained submerged, I cannot say. Consciousness returned abruptly. I was back in our suite, Clara breathing softly beside me in the enormous bed. For a disorienting second, relief washed over me, a horrific dream, nothing more. Then, the sharp sting on my inner arm, the tiny puncture mark, screamed the truth. I shook Clara, gently at first, then with rising panic, until her eyes fluttered open. Recognition flickered there, faint but present, and I nearly wept. "We have to leave," I whispered, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush as I recounted the sterile corridors, the lab, the chilling pronouncements. Skepticism clouded her face initially, but as I spoke, raw fear ignited in her eyes. I thought they were just strange dreams," she stammered, her hand going to her own arm. "But I can barely remember yesterday. It's like gauze over everything." We moved with frantic stealth, throwing clothes into bags, hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against our ribs. Our escape plan, feign normalcy, reach the entrance, disappear. Opening the door shattered that illusion. An attendant stood directly outside, that same vacant, plastered smile firmly in place. "Is everything satisfactory?" he inquired, his tone blandly pleasant, his eyes like polished stones. "Perfectly," I lied, my voice strained. "Just heading out for an early stroll on the beach." He nodded slowly, but as we walked past, I saw him murmuring into a small radio concealed in his palm. We forced ourselves into a casual gait through the lobby, acutely aware of unseen eyes tracking our progress. The massive glass entrance doors were tantalizingly close when a piercing alarm suddenly shrieked through the resort. "Code Red," a disembodied voice boomed from hidden speakers. "Perimeter breach imminent. Subjects attempting egress." All pretense evaporated. We ran. Shouts erupted behind us, the heavy thud of pursuing footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. We burst out into the humid morning air and sprinted across the manicured driveway. Headlights swept towards us, a taxi depositing bewildered new arrivals. Instinct took over. I lunged for the rear door, wrenched it open, and shoved Clara inside. "Go," I yelled at the stunned driver, scrambling in beside her. "Please, just drive, now." Whether it was the raw terror in my voice, or the sight of uniformed figures now spilling from the resort entrance, the driver reacted instantly. Tires screamed as he slammed the car into gear, accelerating violently away from the azure haven. Down the winding coastal road we sped, clinging to each other, trembling uncontrollably with adrenaline and residual horror. We were out, but the escape felt incomplete, tainted. What indelible mark had they left on us? How many others remained ensnared in that polished nightmare? We reported everything to the authorities in the nearest city. Our frantic story met with thinly veiled disbelief. Our word against a prestigious, internationally acclaimed resort with no tangible proof? Predictably, by the time any formal investigation was mounted, the Azure Haven had vanished, closed abruptly for renovations. The official story went. Staff, remaining guests, all gone, evaporated like morning mist. Months bled into a year of medical consultations, endless tests seeking to identify the unknown compounds lingering in our bloodstreams. The long-term consequences remain a terrifying unknown. Nightmares are frequent visitors, dragging me back to the cold, sterile lab. Clara still experiences moments of unsettling blankness, her gaze momentarily acquiring that same glassy, vacant quality I saw in the other doomed guests. Recovery feels like a distant shore we may never reach, but we tell our story, a desperate warning whispered against the allure of paradise found too easily. So should you ever encounter an offer that seems flawless, immaculate sands, unparalleled luxury, a price that defies belief, pause. Look closer, because sometimes the most beautiful facades conceal the deepest darkness, and the welcoming smile offering refreshment might be the very key unlocking a horror from which escape is merely the beginning. The stench hit first, of violations in the air, caustic and alien. It coiled out the moment the warehouse door yielded, a chemical serpent striking deep, whispering that I'd trespassed into a place I was never meant to find. 6 months I'd walked the graveyard shift at Keystone Logistics. Mind-numbing work, yes, but it kept the lights on. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a solitary pilgrimage through the echoing canyons of stacked commerce, ensuring the slumbering giant remained undisturbed. Predictability was the job's only perk, until that particular Tuesday. Midnight had just bled into Wednesday. My routine patrol carried me through the concrete labyrinth, flashlight beam cutting cones of dust-moted light, the soles of my boots the only percussion in the vast silence. Towering racks loomed like skeletal giants, laden with dormant cargo. This place, a frantic anthill by day, transformed into a mausoleum under the moon. Finishing my sweep of the east wing, my gaze snagged on an anomaly, a sliver of luminescence beneath the roll-up door of Storage Unit 17. That bay was supposed to be vacant, a dead space on my rounds for months. A prickle of unease, a tug of curiosity. I moved towards it, my fingers brushing the radio clipped to my hip, a familiar weight suddenly inadequate. The noxious air assaulted me the instant I eased the door upward just a crack. Ammonia, sharp bleach notes, tangled with something else, something viscid and unidentifiable that clawed at the back of my throat. My eyes streamed. A cough threatened to betray me. Blinking through the chemical haze, I directed my light inside. The beam illuminated a scene that turned the marrow in my bones to ice. Makeshift benches crowded the space, cluttered with glassware, flasks, coils of tubing, condensers, ghosts from some long-forgotten chemistry lesson. Presiding over this grotesque tableau, a complex metal apparatus hissed and bubbled, a monstrous heart pulsing with illicit life. No leap of intellect was needed. This was a laboratory, a clandestine factory churning out poison, and it wasn't small. My thoughts fractured, scattering like startled birds. How long? Whose operation? What now? The imperative screamed, "Call it in." Yet a deeper tremor stayed my hand. The sheer scale, the complexity far beyond street-level brewing. This bore the fingerprints of something organized, something with reach. If they could embed this operation so seamlessly within these walls, how far did their tendrils penetrate? Frozen in the doorway, caught between instinct and a sudden paralyzing calculation, I heard it. Movement. Footsteps, muffled but distinct, approaching from the unit's deeper recesses. Adrenaline surged. I killed the light, melting back behind a towering pallet stacked high with anonymous cartons. Breath held captive in my chest, praying the shadows would hold me. Two figures emerged, materializing from behind a crudely erected partition. Even bathed in the dim chemical glow, menace radiated from them. One lean and tall, his arms a canvas of ink. The other are a slab of muscle packed onto a thick frame, head shaved clean, eyes like chips of obsidian. Their voices were low, guttural murmurs, yet fragments snagged in the heavy air. Delivery's lagging. The old man's getting pissed. Told you, should have stayed with the southern crew. These new suppliers flaky. Yeah, well, the price is right, and you can't argue with the purity. I remained utterly still, a statue carved from fear. They stood between me and the only escape. Discovery meant extinction. That certainty was absolute. Oblivious, they continued their muttered conference, talk of logistics, territories, some rival outfit encroaching. Each syllable added weight to the crushing reality of my intrusion. An eternity compressed into minutes passed before they finally turned, retreating behind the partition. I waited, straining to hear their receding steps fade into nothingness, then eased myself forward, slow motion agony, towards the door. I slipped through the opening, pulling the heavy door down with excruciating care until the latch clicked home, a sound like a gunshot in the silence. Then I ran. Not until the relative sanctuary of the security office did I halt, lungs burning, sweat plastering my shirt to my skin. The lock clicked reassuringly behind me. I slumped into the worn chair, the world tilting, trying to force the jagged images into some coherent order. My hand hovered over the phone, the impulse to dial 911 warring with a chilling counterthought. How? How could such an elaborate setup materialize unnoticed? The equipment, the sheer volume of precursor chemicals. It demanded multiple trips, vehicles, manpower. Someone must have seen. Unless the rot was internal. The realization landed like a physical blow. If Keystone personnel were complicit, who was safe? The supervisor? The daytime manager? My own damn boss? Time stretched, measured in the frantic pulse drumming in my ears. Calling the local precinct felt like rolling dice loaded against me. Tipping off the inside man meant evidence vanished, and likely so would I. Silence, however, meant complicity by inaction, letting this poison factory thrive. I chose a third path: patience, observation. The remainder of my shift was a masterclass in feigned normality, my mind a frantic engine calculating risks and formulating strategies. At 6 a.m., I clocked out numb, but instead of seeking the solace of home, I drove to the quiet anonymity of the public library. Hours vanished under the fluorescent hum as I navigated the web, researching narcotics networks, clandestine labs, the perilous art of gathering evidence without signing my own death warrant. That night, I returned to the warehouse armed differently. A compact, high-resolution camera nestled in my pocket. A digital voice recorder lay dormant until needed. Vigilance became my shadow. It didn't take long. Ronnie, a forklift jockey on the night crew, normally predictable in his routes, began making repeated, furtive visits to Storage Unit 17. A quick glance over his shoulder, a slip inside, then emergence minutes later. I captured grainy images from afar, the distance a necessary shield. Later, concealed by the warehouse's ambient hum, I caught snippets of his hushed phone conversation, loaded words like volume, product, drop points. The following week became a tightrope walk over a chasm. More photos, fragmented audio recordings, meticulous notes documenting suspicious movements, times, personnel interactions. Caution was my constant companion. I varied my patrol routes, checked my mirrors relentlessly, felt unseen eyes tracking my every step. Sleep offered little refuge, my small apartment echoing with phantom noises, every creak a potential threat. The paranoia wasn't imagined, it was survival. These weren't amateurs. A single misstep, a flicker of suspicion in the wrong eyes, and my clandestine investigation would end abruptly, permanently. After 2 weeks, the weight of the accumulated data felt substantial, dangerous. It was time. Trusting the local authorities seemed foolhardy in a town where loyalties could be bought or coerced. Instead, I compiled my findings, the photos, the audio clips, the timelines, and sent them encrypted, anonymous, to the State Division of Criminal Investigation. Then the wait began, each shift a new torment of uncertainty. Would today bring the cavalry, or would it bring discovery and retribution? Friday night. Halfway through my shift, the warehouse erupted, not with fire or explosion, but with a sudden controlled chaos of tactical entry. Figures clad in black, moving with lethal efficiency, materialized from the darkness, securing exits, barking commands. From the deep shadows of a loading bay, I watched them breach Storage Unit 17. Shouts, the thud of bodies, the sharp clang of metal. Ronnie, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, was led out in cuffs, along with several others I vaguely recognized. An agent, badge flashed briefly, materialized beside me. "Sir, we have some questions for you." A wave of profound, bone-deep relief washed through me. It was finished. I had done the necessary, terrible thing. The ensuing hours dissolved into a haze of debriefings, statements, the meticulous handover of my secretly gathered proof. The agents listened intently, their expressions shifting from professional detachment to grudging respect. "You understand the risk you took?" one remarked, his voice low. "These individuals, they're outliers for a significant cartel attempting to establish a new pipeline through this region. Finding out who informed on them, they wouldn't have hesitated. The abstract danger I'd courted suddenly gained terrifying specificity. I had danced closer to oblivion than I'd allowed myself to truly comprehend. My evidence proved pivotal, they explained, instrumental in dismantling not just the lab, but a crucial node in the cartel's burgeoning Midwest network. Lives likely saved, kilos of poison kept off the streets. Pride felt distant, overshadowed by exhaustion and a lingering primal fear. The DCI offered the inevitable: protection, relocation, a clean slate, a borrowed name, a life severed from everything familiar. Part of me recoiled, yearning for the mundane safety of my previous existence. But the rational core knew better. The cartel possessed long memories and even longer arms. Seeking the source of their betrayal would be paramount. I accepted. Reinvention is a slow, awkward process. Days dawn when the ghost of my former life aches like a phantom limb. Then memory serves. The warehouse, suffocating in that caustic miasma, the sinister bubbling from the heart of the lab. I pictured lives potentially shattered by the poison brewed there. The choice, stark and costly, reaffirms itself. Integrity sometimes demands sacrifice. Now anonymity is my shield in a small coastal town, far removed. I am merely another unremarkable face. My past remains buried, a secret kept under the rhythms of a new, deliberately simple life. Yet sometimes, a stray scent catches the breeze, chemical, sharp, wrong, and instantly I am back in that cavernous silence, reminded that the most profound dangers often lurk just beneath the surface of the ordinary.